Tonight we're diving into a story that feels like it was pulled straight from the pages of a sci-fi novel, except it's real. You're standing in the middle of an ancient Persian desert, where the sun scorches your skin and the air shimmers with heat. And yet, you reach for a bowl of something cold, sweet, and utterly refreshing. Ice cream. In the desert. Thousands of years before freezers or even electricity existed. Sounds impossible, right? Well, hold on to your sandals, because this is one of those moments where history slaps you in the face and says, "Yeah, I did that." You probably won't survive this episode without being completely obsessed with how these ancient geniuses figured out how to keep things icy when the world around them was basically a giant oven. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always fun to imagine people all over the world drifting off to sleep while hearing about frozen desserts in the Middle East. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is roughly 400 BCE, give or take a few decades. The place. The vast and unforgiving deserts of ancient Persia, a land ruled by kings who built empires on wisdom, strategy, and, apparently, a deep love for staying cool. You're walking across golden sands, the kind that stretch endlessly beneath a sky so blue it almost hurts to look at. The sun beats down relentlessly, turning every breath into a reminder that survival here isn't just about water, it's about outsmarting the heat itself. And somehow, against all logic, the people of this land aren't just surviving, they're thriving. More than that, they're enjoying chilled treats that would make modern-day ice cream lovers jealous. You see, long before freezers, refrigerators, or even the concept of artificial cooling, the ancient Persians had already cracked the code. They didn't just store ice, they created entire systems to preserve it, using nothing but clever engineering, natural resources, and a whole lot of patience. Historians still argue whether this was purely practical or if someone just really wanted dessert during summer. But either way, the result was genius. These weren't just simple pits dug into the ground to hold snow until it melted. No, the Persians built towering structures called yakchuls, massive, dome-shaped ice storage buildings that could keep ice frozen for months, even in the height of summer. Some of these structures were so well designed that remnants of them still stand today, silent witnesses to a civilization that refused to let the heat win. Now, picture yourself approaching one of these yakchuls. It rises from the sand like a fortress, its thick mud brick walls absorbing the day's heat and slowly releasing it at night. Inside, darkness reigns, but there's a chill in the air, an unnatural, almost magical coldness that defies the blazing world outside. This wasn't just about storing ice for drinking water or preserving food. This was about indulgence. About luxury. About having something sweet and frozen in your mouth even as the sun tried to melt your bones. But how did they even get the ice in the first place? There are no glaciers nearby, no mountain ranges close enough to harvest snow regularly, at least not in the way you might expect. That's where things get even more fascinating. The Persians weren't just smart engineers, they were also master manipulators of their environment. They used a combination of wind catchers, those tall, chimney-like structures designed to funnel cool breezes downward, and underground storage chambers insulated with materials like straw and ash. They even harnessed the power of evaporation, creating pools of water that would freeze overnight thanks to the drastic temperature drops in the desert. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that certain Persian nobles went so far as to import snow from distant mountains, transporting it in tightly packed containers lined with insulating materials. That's dedication. That's the kind of effort usually reserved for gold or spices, not frozen water. But hey, if you've got the means and the desire, why not? So here you are, standing in front of a yakchal, feeling the cool air kiss your skin as you step inside. The scent of damp earth mixes with the faint aroma of mint and citrus, remnants of the flavorings they used in their frozen desserts. You can almost taste it. Not just any frozen treat, but something refined, something luxurious. Something that shouldn't exist in a place where the sun rules with fiery tyranny. This is where it all began. A story of human ingenuity, of civilizations pushing boundaries, of people refusing to be dictated by nature's limits. And trust me, we've only just scratched the surface. Because once you understand how they managed to create ice in the desert, the next question becomes, what exactly did they do with it? The sun is a relentless beast, and in ancient Persia, it ruled with unchallenged fury. You trudge across the desert floor, your sandals kicking up fine dust that clings to your sweat-dampened clothes. The air shimmers above the dunes like liquid fire, distorting the horizon into a wavering mirage. There's no shade for miles, just an endless expanse of sand and stone, baking under the merciless glare of the midday sun. Every step feels heavier than the last, as if the earth itself is trying to slow you down, to remind you who's really in charge out here. This isn't just any desert, this is Persia at its most extreme. A land where summer temperatures could climb past 50 degrees Celsius without breaking a sweat. A place where water was more valuable than gold and shade was a luxury only the richest could afford. And yet, somehow, life thrived. Cities rose from the dust, caravans moved goods across vast distances, and people found ways to not only survive but enjoy themselves even when the heat threatened to melt their bones. You glance toward the sky, shielding your eyes with a hand that's already sunburnt from the day's exposure. There's not a cloud in sight, just the blinding white of an unforgiving sun that seems to hover directly overhead, determined to roast everything beneath it. You can feel the heat pressing down on you like a physical weight, making every breath feel thick and dry. Even the occasional breeze does little to cool you, it carries no relief, only the scent of scorched earth and distant spices. Persia's climate wasn't just hot, it was unpredictable. Winters could bring frost and even snow to the higher elevations, but those cold snaps were fleeting. By spring, the temperature would begin its steady climb back to unbearable levels, and by summer, the land would be transformed into a furnace. Rivers ran low, crops withered, and animals sought shelter in whatever shade they could find. It was a cycle as old as time itself, one that shaped the lives of everyone who called this place home. But rather than surrender to the heat, the people of Persia adapted. They built wind catchers that funneled cool breezes into their homes, dug underground reservoirs to store fresh water, and designed intricate irrigation systems that kept their gardens lush despite the arid surroundings. And when it came to preserving ice, well, that was just another challenge waiting to be conquered. Historians still argue whether the Persian obsession with cooling was purely practical or if it bordered on luxury. After all, why go to such lengths just to keep something frozen? But the answer is simple: because they could. Because in a land where survival often meant enduring the worst nature had to offer, having access to something cold, refreshing, and sweet was more than just a treat, it was a triumph. You take another step forward, feeling the soles of your sandals sink slightly into the warm sand. In the distance, you spot what looks like the silhouette of a yakchal rising against the horizon, a beacon of defiance against the oppressive heat. Its towering form stands in stark contrast to the flat, barren landscape around it, a reminder that human ingenuity could carve comfort out of even the harshest environments. One quirky little tidbit. Some ancient Persian texts suggest that certain nobles used ice not just for food preservation or personal refreshment, but as a status symbol. Having access to something so rare and difficult to maintain was a sign of wealth and power. If you could serve chilled drinks to your guests during the height of summer, you weren't just showing off your hospitality, you were proving that you had control over nature itself. So, as you press onward toward the Yakchal, you can't help but admire the sheer audacity of it all. These people didn't just endure the heat, they outsmarted it. They turned scorching days into opportunities for innovation, transforming necessity into luxury with nothing but clever engineering and a deep understanding of their environment. And as you approach the massive structure ahead, you realize that this is only the beginning of a story far more complex and far more fascinating than you ever imagined. You reach the base of the Yakchal, its towering form casting a long, welcome shadow across the sand. Up close, it's even more impressive than you imagined. Its thick, curved walls rising like a fortress against the relentless sun. The structure is built from layers of hardened mud brick, expertly mixed with lime and other insulating materials to create a barrier so effective that it can keep ice frozen for months at a time. You run your fingers along the rough surface, feeling the coolness beneath the outer layer that's been warmed by the day's heat. This isn't just a building, it's an engineering marvel, a testament to human ingenuity in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Inside, the air shifts instantly. The moment you step through the narrow entrance, a wave of cold greets you like a whispered secret. It's not just a slight drop in temperature. It's a full-bodied chill, sharp enough to make your breath visible for a second before it vanishes into the dim light. The interior is vast, stretching downward into a deep, bowl-like chamber where slabs of ice glisten faintly in the darkness. Some are stacked neatly against the walls, while others sit in shallow pools of meltwater, waiting to be used. This was no ordinary ice storage pit. Unlike the simple holes dug in the ground that might hold snow for a few weeks, the Yakchal was designed for longevity. Its domed shape wasn't just for aesthetics, it played a crucial role in maintaining internal temperatures. The curve of the dome helped deflect direct sunlight, preventing excessive heat buildup, while the thick walls acted as a thermal buffer, absorbing warmth during the day and releasing it slowly at night. Historians still argue whether the design of these structures evolved purely out of necessity or if there was some element of experimentation involved. Did early Persian engineers stumble upon this configuration by accident, or was it the result of careful observation and trial and error? Either way, the end result was nothing short of revolutionary. These massive ice houses could store hundreds, if not thousands, of kilograms of ice, ensuring that even in the height of summer, nobles and commoners alike had access to something refreshingly cold. One quirky little tidbit. Some Yakchals were even equipped with underground tunnels and ventilation shafts that allowed workers to retrieve ice without exposing the entire chamber to the outside heat. Imagine opening a door to a freezer and only letting in a tiny bit of warm air instead of flooding the whole thing with it. That's essentially what these ancient engineers figured out. And considering they did all of this without electricity, modern insulation, or even basic thermometers, it's nothing short of genius. As you move deeper inside, you notice how the architecture seems almost alive, responding to the environment rather than fighting against it. The walls are lined with a special plaster made from a mixture of clay, egg whites, and goat hair, which not only reinforced the structure but also provided an additional layer of insulation. This wasn't just about storing ice, it was about creating a microclimate within the desert, a pocket of cold that defied the scorching world outside. And yet, despite their effectiveness, Yakchals weren't just scattered randomly across the landscape. They were strategically placed near cities, caravanserais, and even military outposts, ensuring that those who needed them most had access to preserved ice. Some were even built near water sources, allowing for easier replenishment during the winter months when nature provided its own supply of frozen resources. The process of filling a yakchul was an event in itself. During the coldest nights of winter, water would be poured into shallow pits or channels surrounding the structure, where it would freeze overnight thanks to the drastic temperature drops. Workers would then break up the ice into manageable chunks and transport them inside, stacking them carefully to maximize storage space and minimize melting. The final touch. A thick layer of straw, sawdust, or ash would be spread over the top, acting as a natural insulator that further protected the ice from the returning heat. It's easy to forget, standing here in the cool embrace of the yakchul, that this technology predates modern refrigeration by millennia. But as you take another step forward, your sandals crunching softly against the stone floor, you realize that this place wasn't just about survival, it was about indulgence. About luxury. About having something sweet and cold in your mouth even when the world around you feels like it's on fire. So, as you stand in the heart of this ancient icehouse, surrounded by the echoes of history and the faint scent of damp earth, you begin to understand why the Persians went to such great lengths. This wasn't just a place to store ice, it was a symbol of defiance, a declaration that even in the harshest conditions, civilization could find a way to thrive. The secret to the yakchul's chilling magic lies not just in its towering dome, but in the layers of clever engineering woven into every brick and corridor. You lean against one of the thick walls, feeling the coolness seep through your tunic like a whisper from the past. This isn't just stone, it's insulation, built with a precision that modern architects still admire today. The mud bricks are dense and packed tightly together, designed not only for structural strength but to act as a thermal buffer, absorbing the desert's brutal heat during the day and releasing it slowly at night. It's like having a giant, sand-covered refrigerator humming quietly beneath the surface. But the real genius is in the details. The inner lining of the yakchul isn't just smooth plaster, it's a special mixture of clay, egg whites, and goat hair, creating an almost impermeable barrier that keeps warm air out and cold air locked inside. This wasn't some accidental discovery. This was science before science had a name. Someone, thousands of years ago, figured out that by blending these materials together, they could create a kind of ancient superinsulation that would keep their ice stores from melting too quickly. You take a step back and glance up at the domed ceiling. Its curvature isn't just for show, it plays a crucial role in maintaining the internal temperature. The shape helps deflect direct sunlight, preventing excessive heat buildup, while also allowing any rising warm air to circulate and escape through strategically placed vents near the top. It's a passive cooling system, powered entirely by nature's own forces. No electricity, no machines, just physics working in perfect harmony with human ingenuity. Historians still argue whether this level of architectural sophistication was the result of trial and error or if early Persian engineers had a deeper understanding of thermodynamics than we give them credit for. Either way, the results speak for themselves. These structures were so effective that some still stand today, silent sentinels of a civilization that refused to let the desert dictate their comfort. One quirky little tidbit. Some yakchuls even had underground tunnels that allowed workers to retrieve ice without exposing the entire chamber to the outside heat. Imagine opening your freezer door and only letting in a tiny puff of warm air instead of flooding the whole thing with it. That's essentially what these ancient engineers figured out. And considering they did all of this without modern tools or scientific instruments, it's nothing short of astonishing. As you move deeper into the structure, you notice the floor sloping gently downward, guiding meltwater toward a central drainage channel. This wasn't just a place to store ice, it was a carefully designed ecosystem, where every drop of water was accounted for. The melted ice trickled away into underground reservoirs, where it could be used later for drinking, irrigation, or even more freezing cycles when winter returned. Nothing went to waste. And then there's the insulation layer on top of the ice itself. A thick blanket of straw, sawdust, or ash covered the frozen slabs like a protective cocoon, shielding them from the slightest rise in temperature. This wasn't just about keeping things cold, it was about controlling the environment within the yachtule, turning it into a self-sustaining microclimate where ice could survive long after the last frost had vanished from the mountains. You pause for a moment, letting the silence settle around you. There's something almost sacred about this place, like stepping into a temple built not for gods, but for survival. The Persians didn't just build these structures to store ice, they built them to defy the very laws of nature. In a land where the sun ruled with unrelenting fury, they carved out pockets of cold, proving that even in the harshest conditions, human ingenuity could find a way to thrive. So here you are, standing in the heart of one of history's most remarkable cooling systems, surrounded by the echoes of an ancient world that understood the value of staying cool, both literally and figuratively. And as you prepare to step back into the scorching desert outside, you can't help but wonder, what else did these brilliant minds figure out that we've yet to rediscover? You step outside the yachtule, and immediately the contrast hits you like a punch to the chest. The cool embrace of the icehouse vanishes in an instant, replaced by the relentless desert heat that presses down on your skin like a smothering blanket. But even as sweat beads form on your brow, you notice something strange, a faint, almost imperceptible breeze curling around the towering structure behind you. It's not much, just a whisper of air against your sun-warmed face, but it's enough to remind you that the Persians didn't just rely on thick walls and underground chambers to keep things cold. They harnessed the very wind itself. Before you, rising high above the landscape, stands one of the most ingenious architectural marvels of ancient Persia, the wind catcher. These towering, chimney-like structures dot the skyline, their slender forms reaching toward the heavens like silent sentinels watching over the land. Some have a single opening facing the prevailing wind, while others boast multiple directional vents, each carefully positioned to capture the slightest breath of air sweeping across the desert. You tilt your head back, squinting against the glare of the sun as you take in the sight. At first glance, they look like simple towers, ornamental at best, but appearances can be deceiving. The wind catchers aren't just for show, they're passive cooling systems so effective that modern architects still study them today. Their design is deceptively simple: tall, hollow shafts built into the roofs or walls of buildings, designed to funnel cool breezes downward into the interior spaces below. As warm air rises, it escapes through the upper vents, creating a continuous flow of cooler air from outside. It's natural air conditioning, powered entirely by physics and the ever-present desert winds. You walk closer, placing a hand against the outer wall of one of these structures. Despite the searing temperatures outside, the stone feels slightly cooler than the surrounding air. That's because the wind catcher isn't just drawing in fresh air, it's also helping regulate the internal temperature of the building it's attached to. In some cases, entire homes were designed around these towering vents, with courtyards and underground tunnels amplifying the cooling effect. Historians still argue whether the concept of the wind catcher was developed purely out of necessity or if early Persian engineers had a deeper understanding of airflow dynamics than we give them credit for. Either way, the results speak for themselves. These towering vents could lower indoor temperatures by up to 10 degrees Celsius, making life in the scorching desert not just bearable, but comfortable. One quirky little tidbit: some wind catchers were even used to freeze water overnight. By channeling the night air into specially designed basins or shallow pits, The Persians could create thin layers of ice without any artificial intervention. Imagine waking up to a sheet of frost-covered ground in the middle of summer. That's exactly what these clever structures made possible. And considering they did all of this without electricity, fans, or refrigeration, it's nothing short of genius. As you move around the base of the wind catcher, you notice small openings near the bottom, vents that allow the cooled air to circulate throughout the building. Some lead directly into underground storage chambers, where perishables could be kept fresh, while others connect to shaded courtyards, where families could gather in relative comfort during the hottest parts of the day. This wasn't just about staying cool, it was about designing an entire lifestyle around the principles of passive climate control. And yet, despite their effectiveness, wind catchers weren't just reserved for the wealthy elite. While grand palaces and noble estates certainly featured the most elaborate versions, simpler iterations could be found in everyday homes, caravanserais, and even roadside rest stops. If you were lucky enough to find shelter beneath one of these towering vents during a long desert journey, you knew you'd stumbled upon a rare luxury. You lean in slightly, pressing your ear against the cool surface of the wind catcher's inner shaft. A faint whistling sound hums within, like the distant echo of a forgotten song carried on the breeze. It's mesmerizing, really, how something so simple could have such a profound impact on daily life. The Persians didn't just endure the heat, they mastered it. They turned the very forces of nature into tools of survival, proving that sometimes, the best solutions are the ones that work with the world rather than against it. So here you stand, surrounded by the towering ghosts of ancient engineering, reminded once again that history is full of surprises. The next time you feel a cool gust of wind rushing through an open window, take a moment to appreciate the legacy of those who figured this out long before modern science caught up. Because thousands of years ago, in the heart of the desert, someone looked up at the sky and said, "I bet I can make this work for me." The ice wasn't just made here in the desert, it was harvested from the distant mountains, carried across scorching sands by caravans that moved like ghosts beneath the relentless sun. You stand at the edge of a frozen pool tucked into the foothills of a highland range far to the north, where winter still clings stubbornly to the earth even as spring begins its slow march southward. The air is sharp and clean, laced with the crisp scent of pine and snowmelt. It's a world away from the blistering heat of the Persian heartland, but this is where it all begins. The process starts before dawn, when the temperature hovers just below freezing and the surface of the water has formed a thin, glassy layer of ice overnight. Workers move quietly through the pre-dawn gloom, their breath visible in the frigid air as they inspect the pools for thickness. These aren't natural lakes or rivers, they're shallow, carefully constructed basins designed specifically for this purpose. The idea is simple: pour water into these depressions during the coldest months, let nature do the rest, and then harvest the resulting sheets of ice before the sun can reclaim them. You watch as one worker tests a patch of ice with the butt of his wooden mallet, tapping gently until he hears the solid, resonant thud that tells him it's ready. Satisfied, he signals to the others, and soon the quiet is shattered by the rhythmic crack of tools striking frozen water. The ice breaks cleanly, splitting into large slabs that are pried loose with iron chisels and wooden wedges. Each piece is roughly uniform, shaped not only by necessity but by experience. Too thick, and it won't fit into storage; too thin, and it will melt too quickly once transported. Once freed from the basin, the ice is stacked in neat piles near the edge of the pool, where it waits to be packed for transport. But this isn't just about breaking off chunks of frozen water and tossing them into carts. No, the Persians had a system, one that ensured their precious cargo would survive the long journey south. Before loading begins, layers of insulating material are laid down in the transport containers. This could be straw, sawdust, or even crushed reeds, all chosen for their ability to trap cold air and minimize heat transfer. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that certain Persian traders experimented with using wool soaked in salt water as an additional insulating layer. The theory was that the salt lowered the melting point of the ice, effectively slowing the thawing process. Whether this was a widespread practice or just an occasional experiment remains unclear, but it speaks volumes about the level of detail involved in this operation. As the first blocks are loaded into the waiting carts, you notice how carefully each one is placed, not stacked haphazardly, but arranged with precision, leaving minimal gaps between the slabs. Every inch of space is accounted for, every exposed surface shielded by another layer of insulation. By the time the final block is nestled into place, the entire container looks more like a tightly wrapped bundle than a simple ice shipment. Historians still argue whether this method of ice harvesting was purely practical, or if there was an element of ritual involved. After all, transporting something so delicate across such vast distances required not just engineering skill but also careful planning and a deep understanding of environmental conditions. Caravans left during the coldest hours of the night, moving under the cover of darkness when temperatures were lowest. They traveled swiftly but deliberately, avoiding direct sunlight whenever possible and making frequent stops to check on their cargo. And yet, despite the challenges, these ice shipments reached their destinations. Some went directly to yachtals, where they would be stored for months, while others were delivered to noble households or bustling marketplaces where chilled treats were already becoming a symbol of status. Imagine being served a drink so cold it frosted the rim of the cup, or biting into a frozen fruit confection that sent shivers down your spine, a luxury in a land where survival often meant enduring the worst nature had to offer. As the last cart is secured and the caravan prepares to depart, you catch a glimpse of the rising sun cresting over the distant peaks. Its golden light spills across the icy pools, turning them into glittering mirrors that reflect the sky above. For a brief moment, everything seems peaceful, untouched by the urgency of the task at hand. But then the wind shifts, carrying with it the first hints of warmth, and you know it's time to move. So, with the ice safely packed and the caravan rolling forward, you turn your gaze southward, toward the horizon where the desert stretches endlessly ahead. The journey is long, the heat unforgiving, but the destination is worth it. Because somewhere out there, in the heart of ancient Persia, people are waiting not just for ice, but for the cool relief it brings, the sweet indulgence it makes possible, and the ingenuity that made it all real. You stand at the edge of a massive underground chamber, peering into its shadowed depths. The air here is thick with cold, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something almost sweet, like the lingering memory of fruit long since gone. This isn't just any storage pit, it's a carefully orchestrated symphony of insulation, airflow, and temperature control, designed to keep ice frozen for months on end. The process begins before the first block of ice even touches the floor. As workers lower the slabs into the chamber, they do so with precision, placing each one in a way that minimizes gaps and maximizes efficiency. There's no haphazard stacking here, every inch of space is accounted for, every exposed surface shielded by another layer of cold. But the real magic happens beneath your feet, in the layers of insulating materials that line the chamber like a protective cocoon. First comes a thick bed of straw, spread evenly across the stone floor. It acts as a natural barrier, preventing direct contact between the ice and the warm ground below. Then, a layer of sawdust follows, packed tightly to trap pockets of still air, an essential element in slowing down heat transfer. Some chambers even use crushed reeds or wool soaked in salt water, an experimental technique believed to further reduce melting by lowering the ice's thermal conductivity. Historians still argue whether these methods were developed through trial and error or if early Persian engineers had a deeper understanding of thermodynamics than we give them credit for. Either way, the results speak for themselves. These layered materials create a kind of ancient refrigeration system, where cold is not just stored but actively preserved, held in place by science long before science had a name. As more ice is added, the layers continue, each new slab covered with another blanket of insulation, until the entire chamber resembles a frozen cake stacked high with alternating tiers of ice and organic material. The final touch. A thick lid made of wood or stone, sealed shut with a mixture of clay and ash to prevent warm air from seeping inside. Once closed, the chamber becomes a self-contained microclimate, where temperatures remain consistently low despite the scorching world outside. One quirky little tidbit. Some yachtals even featured underground tunnels that allowed workers to retrieve ice without exposing the entire chamber to the elements. Imagine opening a freezer door and only letting in a tiny puff of warm air instead of flooding the whole thing with it. That's essentially what these ancient engineers figured out. And considering they did all of this without modern tools or scientific instruments, it's nothing short of astonishing. But it's not just about keeping things cold, it's about controlling the environment within the chamber itself. The walls are lined with a special plaster made from a mixture of clay, egg whites, and goat hair, creating an almost impermeable barrier that keeps warm air out and cold air locked inside. This wasn't just about storing ice. It was about creating a delicate balance, a harmony between nature and human ingenuity that allowed frozen treasures to survive well into the summer months. As you step closer, you notice how the structure seems almost alive, responding to the environment rather than fighting against it. The curved dome above helps deflect direct sunlight, while strategically placed vents allow excess warmth to escape without disturbing the internal chill. Even the shape of the chamber plays a role. The deep, bowl-like design ensures that rising warm air doesn't linger near the ice but instead rises toward the top, where it can be vented away. This isn't just engineering, it's artistry. Every detail has been considered, every material chosen for its specific properties. And as you stand here, surrounded by the echoes of history and the faint scent of damp earth, you begin to understand why the Persians went to such great lengths. This wasn't just about survival, it was about indulgence. About luxury. About having something sweet and cold in your mouth even when the world around you feels like it's on fire. So, as you prepare to leave this icy sanctuary behind, you take one last look at the chamber before you. It's quiet now, its secrets buried beneath layers of frost and time. But you know better. You know that somewhere deep within those walls, the past is still breathing, whispering tales of ingenuity and defiance in a land where the sun ruled with unrelenting fury. You step into a courtyard shaded by the towering walls of a nobleman's estate, and immediately the air feels different, cooler, somehow, despite the midday sun beating down just beyond the stone perimeter. The scent of citrus and honey lingers in the breeze, carried from an open kitchen where servants bustle over steaming pots and shallow trays filled with crushed ice. This isn't just about keeping things cold anymore. This is about indulgence, about transforming survival into something luxurious. The Persians didn't just store ice to preserve food or keep water cool, they took it a step further, crafting frozen desserts that would make modern-day gelato shops blush with envy. You watch as a servant carefully ladles a thick, syrupy mixture over a bed of finely shaved ice, watching as the cold instantly sets the liquid into a smooth, almost creamy texture. It's a precursor to what we now know as ice cream, though back then it was more of a chilled confection than a true frozen treat. Still, the effect is the same, a burst of sweet, refreshing delight that momentarily makes you forget the oppressive heat outside. Historians still argue whether these early Persian desserts were purely for pleasure or if they had medicinal purposes as well. Some records suggest that certain cooling syrups were believed to balance the body's humors, protecting against the harsh effects of summer. Others claim they were simply a luxury enjoyed by the wealthy elite, a way to show off not just wealth but access to something as rare as ice in the middle of July. Either way, one thing is clear: the ancient Persians knew how to turn necessity into something beautiful. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that Persian nobles experimented with freezing rose water-infused milk, creating an early version of what we might recognize today as a sorbet or custard-based ice cream. They even used molds carved from wood or metal to shape their frozen creations, making them look more like delicate sculptures than simple treats. And considering they did all of this without refrigeration or modern tools, it's nothing short of genius. As you move closer to the kitchen, you notice the variety of ingredients laid out on wooden tables: fresh pomegranates, dried figs, crushed pistachios, and jars of saffron-infused syrup. These weren't just random choices. Each ingredient played a role in enhancing both flavor and texture. Fruits provided natural sweetness and acidity, balancing the richness of dairy-based mixtures. Nuts added crunch, while spices like cinnamon and cardamom gave depth to the otherwise simple base of ice and sugar. And speaking of sugar, this wasn't the refined white stuff we're used to today. Instead, the Persians relied on date syrup, honey, and sometimes even grape molasses to sweeten their creations. These natural sweeteners had the added benefit of lowering the freezing point of the mixture slightly, helping it stay soft and scoopable even when stored in the depths of a yachtchel. It's a technique that modern ice cream makers still use today, though back then it was more of an accidental discovery than a scientific formula. You take a small spoonful of the freshly made dessert offered to you, a blend of crushed ice, rose water, and a touch of saffron, and let it melt slowly on your tongue. The cold spreads through your mouth like a wave, followed closely by the floral sweetness of the rose water and the earthy warmth of the saffron. It's unlike anything you've ever tasted, both familiar and entirely foreign at the same time. This is what it meant to live in ancient Persia: not just survival, but sophistication. Not just endurance, but indulgence. In a land where the sun ruled with unrelenting fury, the people found ways to carve out moments of pure, unadulterated pleasure. Whether it was a simple bowl of flavored ice served at a roadside caravanserai or an elaborate frozen delicacy presented at a royal banquet, the result was the same: a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, civilization could find a way to thrive. So here you are, standing in the heart of one of history's most remarkable culinary traditions, surrounded by the echoes of an ancient world that understood the value of staying cool, both literally and figuratively. And as you prepare to step back into the scorching desert outside, you can't help but wonder, what else did these brilliant minds figure out that we've yet to rediscover? You step into the shade of a bustling Persian marketplace, where the air is thick with the mingling scents of saffron, roasted almonds, and something else, something sharp and sweet that makes your mouth water instantly. It's sherbet, and it's everywhere. Vendors call out their wares from beneath colorful awnings, offering chilled cups of pomegranate, tamarind, and rose water-infused drinks that promise to beat the relentless desert heat. You can almost feel the cold rim of the cup against your lips, the way the liquid spreads across your tongue like a refreshing breeze on a sweltering afternoon. Sherbets weren't just beverages, they were the bridge between simple ice consumption and true frozen desserts. The word itself comes from the Persian sharbat, meaning a sweetened, flavored drink often served over crushed ice. And while these early versions weren't quite what we'd recognize as modern ice cream, they were close enough to be considered its ancestor. Some were thick and slushy, almost like a granita, while others were so finely shaved that they melted instantly, leaving behind only the lingering taste of citrus or honey. Historians still argue whether these cooling drinks were purely for refreshment or if they had medicinal purposes as well. Some records suggest that certain sherbets were believed to balance the body's humors, protecting against the harsh effects of summer. Others claim they were simply a luxury enjoyed by the wealthy elite, a way to show off not just wealth but access to something as rare as ice in the middle of July. Either way, one thing is clear: the ancient Persians knew how to turn necessity into something beautiful. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that Persian nobles experimented with freezing rose water-infused milk, creating an early version of what we might recognize today as a sorbet or custard-based ice cream. They even used molds carved from wood or metal to shape their frozen creations, making them look more like delicate sculptures than simple treats. And considering they did all of this without refrigeration or modern tools, it's nothing short of genius. As you weave through the crowd, you notice how sherbets aren't just sold in fancy palaces or noble households, they're available to everyone. Street vendors set up small stalls near shaded courtyards, ladling out portions of icy delight into clay cups lined with wax to prevent melting. Caravanserai workers take breaks to sip on chilled drinks after long days spent hauling goods across the desert, while children chase each other through the dust, clutching tiny bowls of crushed fruit ice that dribble down their chins. The ingredients vary depending on the season and region. In spring, fresh pomegranates are split open, their ruby seeds mashed into a tart pulp before being mixed with snow-chilled water and sugar. By midsummer, dried figs and apricots rehydrate in syrup, their sweetness deepening under the sun's relentless glare. Autumn brings spiced blends, cinnamon-laced apple sherbets, cardamom-scented grape molasses, and honey-drizzled almond pastes that melt slowly on the tongue. Winter, of course, offers the most indulgent flavors, thick layers of cream blended with saffron and pistachios, frozen solid in underground chambers until they're ready to be scraped into bowls and devoured. But it's not just about flavor, it's about texture, too. Unlike plain ice, which can numb the tongue and dull the senses, sherbets are carefully crafted to maintain a balance between coldness and richness. Some recipes include beaten egg whites or gelatinous extracts from boiled fruits, giving the mixture a smoother consistency that clings to the spoon rather than shattering into shards. Others rely on repeated scraping and stirring to create fine crystals, ensuring that every bite melts evenly instead of turning into a watery mess. You accept a small bowl from a vendor who grins at you, his teeth stained slightly purple from years of sampling his own creations. The sherbet inside is a deep crimson, flecked with tiny bits of crushed pomegranate seed. You bring the spoon to your lips, and immediately the cold spreads through your mouth like a wave, followed closely by the tangy sweetness of the fruit. It's unlike anything you've ever tasted, both familiar and entirely foreign at the same time. This is what it meant to live in ancient Persia, not just survival, but sophistication. Not just endurance, but indulgence. In a land where the sun ruled with unrelenting fury, the people found ways to carve out moments of pure, unadulterated pleasure. Whether it was a simple bowl of flavored ice served at a roadside caravanserai or an elaborate frozen delicacy presented at a royal banquet, the result was the same. A reminder that even in the harshest conditions, civilization could find a way to thrive. So here you are, standing in the heart of one of history's most remarkable culinary traditions, surrounded by the echoes of an ancient world that understood the value of staying cool, both literally and figuratively. And as you prepare to step back into the scorching desert outside, you can't help but wonder, what else did these brilliant minds figure out that we've yet to rediscover? You step into the grand courtyard of a Persian palace, where nobles recline on silk-draped cushions, fanning themselves lazily beneath the shade of intricately carved wooden awnings. The air is thick with the scent of saffron and roasted almonds, but what catches your attention most is the sight of golden goblets filled with something that glints in the afternoon light, ice-cold drinks, their rims frosted from the chill within. This is no ordinary banquet, it's a display of wealth, power, and, above all, access to something as rare as gold in the middle of summer, ice. The elite of ancient Persia didn't just store ice for survival, they flaunted it. In a land where the sun ruled with unrelenting fury, having access to something cold was a privilege few could afford. And so, the royal courts turned this necessity into a spectacle, serving chilled wines infused with pomegranate syrup, rosewater-infused sherbets, and even frozen fruit pastes that melted slowly on the tongue like early prototypes of modern sorbets. These weren't just refreshments, they were statements. Historians still argue whether these icy indulgences were purely for pleasure or if they had deeper cultural significance. Some records suggest that certain cooling syrups were believed to balance the body's humors, protecting against the harsh effects of summer. Others claim they were simply a way for rulers to show off their control over nature itself. Either way, one thing is clear, the ancient Persians knew how to turn necessity into something beautiful. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that Persian kings went so far as to have entire dining halls built with underground ice chambers, allowing them to keep their wine cool without the need for constant replenishment. Imagine sipping from a cup that never warmed up, even under the blazing midday sun. That's not just luxury, that's engineering at its finest. But you don't have to be royalty to enjoy the benefits of Persian ingenuity. As you make your way through the bustling streets of a nearby market, you notice that the lower classes aren't left out of the frozen treat revolution either. Street vendors set up small stalls near shaded courtyards, ladling out portions of icy delight into clay cups lined with wax to prevent melting. Caravanserai workers take breaks to sip on chilled drinks after long days spent hauling goods across the desert, while children chase each other through the dust, clutching tiny bowls of crushed fruit ice that dribble down their chins. This wasn't just about survival, it was about indulgence. About luxury. About having something sweet and cold in your mouth even when the world around you feels like it's on fire. And while the wealthy might have had more elaborate versions of these treats, perhaps served in silver bowls or garnished with edible gold leaf, the common people found ways to enjoy the same pleasures, albeit on a smaller scale. As you weave through the crowd, you notice how sherbets aren't just sold in fancy palaces or noble households, they're available to everyone. Vendors call out their wares from beneath colorful awnings, offering chilled cups of pomegranate, tamarind, and rosewater-infused drinks that promise to beat the relentless desert heat. You can almost feel the cold rim of the cup against your lips, the way the liquid spreads across your tongue like a refreshing breeze on a sweltering afternoon. The ingredients vary depending on the season and region. In spring, fresh pomegranates are split open, their ruby seeds mashed into a tart pulp before being mixed with snow-chilled water and sugar. By midsummer, dried figs and apricots rehydrate in syrup, their sweetness deepening under the sun's relentless glare. Autumn brings spiced blends, cinnamon-laced apple sherbets, cardamom-scented grape molasses, and honey-drizzled almond pastes that melt slowly on the tongue. Winter, of course, offers the most indulgent flavors, thick layers of cream blended with saffron and pistachios, frozen solid in underground chambers until they're ready to be scraped into bowls and devoured. And yet, despite their differences in presentation and availability, the effect remains the same. Whether you're a noble lounging in a palace garden or a traveler resting beneath the shade of a caravanserai wall, there's something undeniably satisfying about taking a bite of something cold when the world outside is burning hot. It's a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, civilization can find a way to thrive, not just by surviving, but by indulging. So here you are, standing in the heart of one of history's most remarkable culinary traditions, surrounded by the echoes of an ancient world that understood the value of staying cool, both literally and figuratively. And as you prepare to step back into the scorching desert outside, you can't help but wonder, what else did these brilliant minds figure out that we've yet to rediscover? You find yourself in a dimly lit workshop, the air thick with the scent of crushed herbs and melted sugar. The walls are lined with shelves cluttering under the weight of ancient scrolls and clay tablets, their surfaces etched with careful script detailing formulas, measurements, and techniques passed down through generations. This isn't just any kitchen, it's a place where knowledge is guarded like treasure, where secrets are whispered only to those deemed worthy. And tonight, you're about to witness one of Persia's most closely held culinary mysteries unfold before your eyes. A master confectioner, his hands stained faintly green from years of grinding pistachios into paste, leans over a shallow basin filled with a thick, syrupy mixture. He stirs it slowly, deliberately, his movements precise as he tests its consistency between his fingers. This is no ordinary sherbet. This is an art form, a science wrapped in tradition, perfected over centuries by families who treated cooling techniques like sacred rites. Every step of the process is measured, every ingredient chosen with care, every motion honed through years of apprenticeship. Historians still argue whether these methods were ever written down or if they remained purely oral traditions, shared only within families and guilds. Some records suggest that certain recipes were so valuable that they were never committed to parchment, instead passed from father to son, mother to daughter, in hushed voices beneath the cover of night. Others claim that entire schools of confectionery existed, where aspiring ice makers studied under masters who guarded their techniques like warriors protect a fortress. Either way, one thing is clear: the knowledge of how to create and preserve frozen delights was not freely given, it was earned. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that Persian ice makers experimented with using different types of salts and minerals to lower the freezing point of their mixtures, allowing them to achieve smoother textures without relying solely on natural ice. Whether this was a widespread practice or just an occasional experiment remains unclear, but it speaks volumes about the level of detail involved in this craft. The confectioner reaches for a wooden paddle and begins scraping the surface of the mixture, coaxing it into fine, delicate crystals. This isn't just about making something cold, it's about texture, about balance, about ensuring that each bite melts evenly rather than turning into a watery mess. He works quickly, knowing that time is his greatest enemy. The longer the mixture sits exposed to the air, the more heat threatens to undo his work. As you watch, another worker enters carrying a bundle wrapped tightly in cloth. With careful precision, he unwraps it to reveal a block of ice retrieved from a nearby yachtl, its surface still glistening with frost. Without hesitation, the confectioner places it into a stone mortar and begins crushing it with a heavy pestle, reducing it to a fine powder before folding it into his mixture. The result is immediate, a thick, slushy concoction that clings to the sides of the bowl, its scent rich with rosewater and saffron. This is what it meant to be a master of frozen treats in ancient Persia, not just someone who could make something cold, but someone who understood the alchemy of temperature, texture, and flavor. It wasn't enough to simply serve ice. One had to know how to manipulate it, how to coax out its full potential, how to turn simple ingredients into something transcendent. And yet, despite their skill, these artisans remained largely anonymous. Their names were rarely recorded, their contributions often overlooked in favor of the nobles who enjoyed their creations. But their legacy endures, woven into the fabric of Persian culture, carried forward in the recipes still used today in markets and kitchens across the region. You accept a small spoonful of the freshly made treat offered to you, letting it melt slowly on your tongue. The cold spreads through your mouth like a wave, followed closely by the floral sweetness of the rosewater and the earthy warmth of the saffron. It's unlike anything you've ever tasted, both familiar and entirely foreign at the same time. So here you are, standing in the heart of one of history's most remarkable culinary traditions, surrounded by the echoes of an ancient world that understood the value of staying cool, both literally and figuratively. And as you prepare to step back into the scorching desert outside, you can't help but wonder, what else did these brilliant minds figure out that we've yet to rediscover? You stand at the edge of a flickering fire, deep within the halls of an ancient Persian temple, where whispers of ice and magic intertwine like smoke curling into the night sky. Here, beneath the watchful eyes of carved deities and golden idols, stories are told not just for entertainment, but as sacred truths passed from one generation to the next. And tonight, you're about to hear one of the strangest legends of all, the tale of the enchanted ice. It's said that long ago, in the days when kings ruled with divine right and alchemists sought the secrets of immortality, there existed a hidden order of ice makers, men and women who claimed to possess the power to freeze water without snow or yakchuls. They called themselves the Keepers of the Cold, and their methods were shrouded in secrecy. Some believed they had discovered a rare mineral capable of drawing heat from the air itself, while others whispered that they had forged pacts with spirits of the northern winds, binding them to serve mankind's desire for refreshment. Historians still argue whether these accounts were based on real techniques lost to time or if they were simply elaborate myths designed to elevate the prestige of those who mastered the art of cooling. Either way, the legend persisted, growing more elaborate with each retelling. In some versions, the Keepers of the Cold were said to carry vials of frozen fire, a substance so cold it could instantly turn liquid to ice upon contact. In others, they were depicted as wandering mystics who traveled from palace to palace, serving chilled drinks infused with exotic herbs that supposedly granted visions of the future. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that certain Persian nobles went so far as to commission special ice-making rituals, performed under the light of the full moon by masked priests who chanted incantations over shallow pools of water. Whether this was an actual practice or merely superstition remains unclear, but it speaks volumes about how deeply intertwined science and folklore became in the Persian world. As you listen to the storyteller's voice rise and fall with the crackling flames, you can almost imagine what it must have been like to live in a time when the line between natural law and divine intervention was blurred. To the common people, the ability to produce ice in the middle of summer must have seemed nothing short of miraculous. After all, how else could one explain the existence of frozen treats in a land where the sun ruled with unrelenting fury? If someone offered you a bowl of something cold during the height of summer, wouldn't you wonder if they had some kind of supernatural gift? Even today, remnants of these beliefs linger in the cultural memory of the region. In parts of modern Iran, old folk tales still speak of ice whisperers who could summon frost with a mere touch, and some families claim descent from the legendary Keepers of the Cold, guarding recipes and techniques that have remained unchanged for centuries. Whether these claims hold any truth is up for debate, but the fact that the stories persist at all is a testament to how deeply the mystery of Persian ice-making has embedded itself in the collective imagination. And yet, beyond the myths and legends, there was always a foundation of science. The Persians may not have had electricity or refrigeration, but they understood thermodynamics better than most give them credit for. Their wind catchers harnessed the power of airflow. Their yakchuls used insulation to preserve ice for months. Their sherbets blended chemistry with culinary artistry. These weren't magical tricks, they were feats of engineering, refined over generations through observation, experimentation, and sheer determination. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the line between science and magic isn't as clear-cut as we like to believe. After all, what is technology if not the mastery of nature's forces? What is innovation if not the transformation of the impossible into the everyday? And what is history if not a collection of stories, some grounded in fact, others embroidered with wonder, all shaping the way we understand the past? So here you are, standing in the heart of one of history's most enduring mysteries, surrounded by the echoes of an ancient world that understood the value of staying cool, both literally and figuratively. And as you prepare to step back into the scorching desert outside, you can't help but wonder, what else did these brilliant minds figure out that we've yet to rediscover? You stand at the edge of a bustling caravan route, where dust swirls in the air like golden mist beneath the midday sun. The rhythmic clatter of hooves and wooden wheels fills your ears as traders from distant lands pass by, their carts laden with spices, silks, and perhaps most intriguingly, knowledge. This is how Persian cooling techniques traveled far beyond their desert origins, carried westward by merchants, conquerors, and curious travelers who saw the value in something as simple yet revolutionary as ice. The first to take notice were the Greeks, always eager to learn from the civilizations they encountered. Alexander the Great himself was said to be enamored with Persian frozen treats, reportedly sending envoys to study the yakchuls and windcatchers that made such luxuries possible. He even brought Persian engineers back to Macedonia, where they helped design early versions of underground ice storage chambers. Whether these structures ever functioned as well as their Persian counterparts remains unclear, but the attempt alone speaks volumes about the prestige of Persian technology. Historians still argue whether Alexander's fascination with Persian cooling methods was purely practical or if it had more to do with his desire to outdo Darius III in every conceivable way. Either way, the knowledge didn't stop with him. When the Romans rose to power, they too became obsessed with climate control, borrowing heavily from Persian innovations. Some Roman villas featured early forms of windcatchers, while underground cisterns designed to keep wine cool bore an uncanny resemblance to Persian ice pits. Even the famed Roman bathhouses, with their intricate systems of heated and cooled water, owed a debt to Persian engineering principles that had been refined over centuries. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that Roman elites went so far as to import Persian-made sherbet-making tools, complete with hand-carved molds and specialized scraping knives used to shape frozen desserts into elaborate forms. These weren't just functional items, they were status symbols, proof that one had access to the latest culinary trends from the East. And considering how much the Romans loved luxury, it's no surprise they embraced Persian ice culture with open arms. As you watch another caravan roll past, its camels swaying under the weight of their cargo, you realize that this wasn't just about food, it was about influence. Persian cooling techniques shaped not only how people stored and consumed ice, but also how they built their homes, planned their cities, and even how they entertained guests. The concept of having chilled drinks available year-round spread across the Mediterranean, eventually making its way into medieval European kitchens, where monks began experimenting with similar ice storage techniques in monasteries. And yet, despite all this cultural exchange, the original inventors remained largely uncredited. The Persians themselves rarely documented their own technological advancements in the way the Greeks or Romans did, preferring instead to pass down their knowledge through oral tradition and apprenticeship. By the time European scholars began writing about ice preservation, the credit often went to Roman or Greek engineers, leaving the true origins buried beneath layers of historical misattribution. Still, the impact of Persian innovation could not be erased entirely. Even today, architects studying sustainable building practices look to ancient Persian designs for inspiration. The principles behind windcatchers have influenced modern passive cooling systems, while the layered insulation techniques used in yakchuls have found new life in eco-friendly refrigeration alternatives. In a world increasingly concerned with energy efficiency and environmental sustainability, the wisdom of the ancients is proving once again to be ahead of its time. So here you are, standing at the crossroads of history, watching as ideas flow as freely as the goods being traded before your eyes. What began as a necessity in the harsh deserts of Persia has become a legacy that spans continents, cultures, and millennia. And as you prepare to step away from the dusty road and into the next chapter of this journey, you can't help but wonder, how many other forgotten innovations are waiting to be rediscovered? You stand in the middle of a modern city, surrounded by sleek glass towers and bustling streets filled with people clutching frozen drinks from corner kiosks. The air hums with the quiet whir of air conditioners, their vents exhaling cool relief into the summer heat. It's easy to take all of this for granted. After all, we live in an age where ice is as simple as pressing a button on your freezer door. But if you look closely enough, you'll see traces of an ancient Persian innovation that never truly faded: the art of passive cooling. The same principles that once kept yachtals frosty beneath the desert sun are now being rediscovered by architects and engineers seeking sustainable alternatives to energy-intensive refrigeration. In places where electricity is scarce or unreliable, designers have turned back to the wisdom of the ancients, incorporating thick-walled structures, underground storage chambers, and natural ventilation systems into modern buildings. Some eco-friendly homes even feature wind catchers, not just as decorative nods to history, but as functional cooling mechanisms that harness the power of airflow without relying on mechanical fans. Historians still argue whether these modern adaptations are direct descendants of Persian techniques or simply parallel evolutions born from similar environmental challenges. Either way, the results speak for themselves. In arid regions where temperatures soar past 40 degrees Celsius, buildings designed with passive cooling methods can maintain indoor temperatures up to 10 degrees cooler than conventional structures without ever plugging in a single appliance. One quirky little tidbit: some contemporary ice cream shops in the Middle East have even begun experimenting with yachtal-inspired freezers, using layers of insulation and evaporative cooling to keep desserts chilled without relying entirely on electricity. While it might not be practical for large-scale production, the fact that someone is trying speaks volumes about how timeless these ancient innovations really are. As you walk through a museum exhibit dedicated to historical engineering marvels, you come across a life-sized replica of a yachtal, its curved dome rising like a sand-colored sentinel against the backdrop of steel and glass skyscrapers beyond the window. Inside, a small display explains how the structure worked, how its thick walls absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night, how its shape helped deflect sunlight, and how its underground chambers maintained stable temperatures year-round. It's strange to think that something built thousands of years ago could still teach us something today, but here it is, standing tall in the heart of the modern world. And yet, despite all this renewed interest, the original Persian innovators remain largely uncredited. Their names were never etched into stone tablets alongside those of kings and warriors. Their contributions were passed down orally, refined through generations of trial and error rather than recorded in scientific journals. By the time Western scholars began documenting architectural advancements, the credit often went to Roman or Greek engineers, leaving the true origins buried beneath layers of historical misattribution. But maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that their ideas lived on not because they sought recognition, but because they solved a problem so fundamental to human comfort that they became indispensable. Whether it's a medieval monastery keeping wine cool in an underground cellar, a modern home staying comfortable without air conditioning, or even a roadside vendor serving frozen treats in a region where the sun rules with unrelenting fury, the legacy of Persian ingenuity endures. So here you are, standing at the intersection of past and present, watching as history quietly repeats itself in ways both subtle and profound. And as you prepare to step away from the museum exhibit and back into the heat of the city outside, you can't help but wonder, what other forgotten innovations are waiting to be rediscovered? The night air is cool now, carrying with it the faint scent of desert herbs and distant fires. You lie beneath a sky so vast it feels infinite, where stars blink lazily above the ruins of an ancient yachtchal standing silent against the horizon. The wind whispers through the cracked stone walls, a sound almost like breathing, as if the structure itself still remembers the cold it once held. You trace your fingers along the rough surface of the ground, feeling the residual chill that lingers even after the sun has long vanished behind the dunes. It's strange to think that centuries ago, someone just like you might have stood in this very spot, marveling at the same sky, tasting the same dry air, perhaps savoring a spoonful of frozen delight crafted from nothing more than ingenuity and determination. History often feels distant, etched into crumbling monuments or buried beneath layers of sand and time. But tonight, as you drift between wakefulness and sleep, it feels close enough to touch. The Persians didn't just store ice, they defied nature, bent the rules of survival, and carved moments of luxury out of one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. They built structures that could hold winter's breath for months, engineered entire cities to breathe cool air, and turned necessity into indulgence with nothing but patience and knowledge passed down through generations. Historians still argue whether their mastery of cooling was purely practical or if there was something deeper at play, an unspoken desire to prove that even in the most unforgiving conditions, civilization could not only endure but thrive. Either way, their legacy endures, woven into the fabric of modern life in ways both seen and unseen. From the passive cooling systems influencing sustainable architecture to the frozen treats we take for granted every summer, echoes of their genius surround us. One quirky little tidbit. Some sources suggest that certain Persian nobles believed ice had mystical properties, capable of preserving youth or enhancing wisdom when consumed in the right combinations. Whether they were onto something or simply enjoying the pleasures of chilled desserts remains unclear, but either way, they knew how to live well. As you settle deeper into the soft earth, your thoughts begin to slow, drifting like the desert breeze that curls around you. The world beyond these sands feels far away now, distant cities humming with electric lights, machines whirring endlessly to keep food cold, people moving fast without ever stopping to wonder how such simple luxuries came to be. But here, beneath the quiet stars, everything feels simpler, more connected. So let the past wrap around you like a familiar blanket, its stories whispering through the night air. Let the image of towering yachtchals and wind catchers rise in your mind, their shapes outlined by moonlight rather than history books. And as your eyelids grow heavier, remember that somewhere, long ago, in the heart of an ancient empire, someone looked up at the same sky and decided that even in the middle of a burning desert, they deserved something sweet and cold. Sleep now, traveler. The stars will watch over you, just as they watched over those who came before. Cool dreams drift through the night air like soft whispers on a desert breeze. The stars above shimmer gently, their light casting long shadows across the sand where ancient yachtchals still stand as silent sentinels of a forgotten era. Somewhere in the distance, a lone windcatcher hums quietly, catching the last breath of the evening and funneling it into the cool embrace of stone walls that have known frost and fire alike. You sink deeper into sleep, carried by the rhythm of history's lullaby, the quiet persistence of human ingenuity, the stubborn refusal to let nature dictate comfort. The Persians, who once carved cold from heat with nothing but clever hands and sharper minds, whisper through time, reminding you that even in the harshest conditions, we find ways to thrive. Let your thoughts slow, like the final notes of a song fading into silence. Let the warmth of ancient wisdom wrap around you like a familiar blanket. And as the world outside fades into stillness, know that somewhere beneath those same stars, the past is dreaming too.